This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. It's playoff week. It's time for us to talk about the Browns. Playoff Browns. Sounds good to say that, doesn't it, Jake?
It is, like we mentioned off air, it's been a long year, and this feels like somehow like week 32. But yeah, man, pretty cool to still be going when everyone else pretty much is packed it in, right?
Yes. Not just going. Like, I don't know about you, but I get the growing sense from people in Cleveland that they feel better about this team than even the 2020 team. What are you feeling about this?
I think that's fair. The reason we talked about this yesterday on my show, ironically, is I feel like when you and I get together, I'm like talking about some things that you're talking about. I think that's maybe why we do okay in this industry. The vibe I have is this is the most open playoff experience we've had in a while, where there's not like, in the past, I don't know, 10 years, if you go all the way back to like the Broncos, man, those guys are tough to beat, even if you have a good run. And then it's like Tom Brady was right in the heart of that. I mean, the Patriots are brutal to beat, right? In that mix. And then the Mahomes Chiefs, when they were really right, were another team where it's like, yeah, we got a chance. It's kind of like with the 2020 team. Like, yeah, hell, they beat the Steelers. This is awesome. Now they got to go to Arrowhead. And that's like, you're just basically banking on an L. So I think this year, obviously, the Bills are the 2 seed, and we know their flaws. The Dolphins were a team to be afraid of because of the striking ability they had, but you're looking at their limitations now without Waddle, without Mostert. Maybe they get those guys back, but it's hard to see them with especially their edge limitations defensively. They're really, really beat up over there. They're not who they were. So then Kansas City, we know, has struggled offensively all year. And then looking at, I think the Browns are not afraid at all. There's one team in the AFC that's not afraid of the Ravens. It's the Browns. They have no fear about playing those guys, especially going there and playing them. So I think that, it's funny. This would be a great year to feel like you're most confident about them, the Browns. But I think there's been, I don't know what you think, but this is my hunch, is that there has been, since Watson got hurt in week 10, a lot of like doom and gloom about when is this going to come to an end. It's great what they're doing. The story is awesome, but the end is just kind of lingering, and you feel like you're kind of creeping out over the edge, and you can see the ending. It's there. I feel like there have been a lot of fans that have thought that way, and the Browns have just, as Flacco has taken over, continued to find ways and have reached a point where they're sort of better than ever right now, as my dog's in the background, sort of better than they've been up to any point in the season. But like, again, I feel like people are sort of like going into this playoff game expecting that, like, okay, this has got to end at some point, but this is the year that it doesn't have to end. If they handle business in a way I think we all believe that they can, despite what our brains are tricking us into thinking the AFC is like always got a juggernaut, there isn't one. And we've seen the NFC. The Browns have beat the 1 seed in both conferences. They know they can play with anybody. So, yeah, man, this is a very open playoff run here. Like, if the hottest team is going to win this thing, and I think you would agree with me, where we've seen the Browns play a good version of football over the last 2 weeks before, the throwaway week 18 game, that week 16, 17, where they obviously go into Houston and handle their business and then take care of the Jets with a dominant first half. That team can win playoff games, and all of it takes is a couple of the things going in the right direction. And you're looking at an AFC Championship game, Quincy, where they could. It's a coin flip. It's a coin flip, and that'd be unbelievable. But this is the type of year that allows that, in my opinion, man.
Yeah, and I think the reason I have a lot of confidence in this team is part of what you said. Like, they take care of business, right? Opportunities in front of them. They don't lose the game to the Jets, right, that they lost in 2020. And I know they didn't have any wide receivers, ironically enough. By the end of that Jets game, they didn't have any wide receivers either. And this one, still found a way to finish the game. And that's a difference, right? This team's taking care of business. And Flacco was I think notably better in those last 2 starts.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, okay, some of the turnover stuff it's lessened, even though like the numbers are still there. A couple of those turnovers in the Texans games, it's like, okay, well, they just didn't have a kicker. So
Yeah.
that kind of stuff was going to happen. And I just, I look at this team and go, hey, if the offense is not going to be an obstacle,
Mm-hmm.
that's the best thing in the world for this defense, because that's really all you want. It's like, hey, don't let your offense become a obstacle to winning. Like, you don't want to win in spite of your offense. If you win because of your defense and just that exclusively, it's fine. If you win because your offense stayed out the way, it's fine. But you don't want to have to keep winning in spite of offense. And I think that they've at least got it there to the point to where it's like, hey, man, we're kind of winning some of this stuff because the offense is playing really good football. Now, that being said, we look at this and there's two minds of thought. There's the one mind that's kind of similar to what you were bringing up before, where it's like, hey, Joe Flacco is 38. He has not had a great track record in the last 5 years. And this Browns team has 2 third-string tackles in for them offensively. And at some point, that's going to matter. Or there's another line, and maybe you got to combine both minds here of thinking, hey, Joe Flacco is in a system he's super familiar with. This is not some gimmick that we're running. This is just, same offense we've been running for years here, West Coast style, like Shanahan, whatever you want to term it. It's that style of offense.
Yeah.
And you have guys at receiver, right? David Njoku has proven himself to be a dude at tight end. Same thing can be said with Amari Cooper. He's proven himself to be a very good asset there. I think Elijah Moore has had a nice second half of the season, especially. And I think that Jerome Ford has been a fine receiver out the backfield as well. So you have that. You have guys who can get open, and you have a great defense, and that feels sustainable. Where you can look at it on the other way and it doesn't feel sustainable. To you, when you look at this, the pragmatist that you are, you tend to try to be process over results.
Yeah.
When you look at this, do you see something that is sustainable, or do you see something where you're just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping this thing works for 4 or 5 weeks?
I think it's a mixture of both, because at times there have been moments, I think you would agree with me, where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like how they're doing this, the Jets game in particular, where they're finding these answers against a really good Jets defense that we thought they'd struggle against, making plays down the field, making throws into tight windows, Flacco scrambling to his left, dropping it off to Jerome Ford. Like, there have been moments where it's like, I mean, I was in the stadium for that one, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. How this is coming together is above explanation at times. So I think it is a mixture of both, right? The good thing for the Browns is they have multiple avenues to winning. I think that is something that you should feel positive about. They can run dominate you, defense dominate you in a way that can help you win some low scoring ball games, right? And there's a train of thought of like, are they going to go into the playoffs ready to rip the thing open, continue to push Flacco to 35 plus attempts, and try to go at it that way? Or are they going to try to be a little bit more conservative, run even against some of the some of the data maybe throughout a game? They're not running it efficiently. They're still going to try to run it because they know they can play field position game as long as they don't beat themselves. Because I think you would agree with me, Flacco has been really exciting at times, but he's also been like, what's going on, man? What did you see there? But there's, it is also elements of like Cedric Tillman not helping at times, a young player, and some stuff like, I mean, again, the Jets tip ball interception was a phenomenal play to turn that one back for a touchdown. So I think, listen, you're asking sort of like, is this sustainable? I think when Flacco took over through the first 3 games, that Bears game, I had sort of told myself, and I was explaining to people on my pod, this is fun. They're going to do something unique here, make the playoffs, right? But we know where this ends. This ends in an early playoff exit, right? I've since removed that a cap because of 2 things. First, what we just talked about, where all of these AFC teams are flawed, and even the NFC teams that they could potentially see if they do find a way to get there are flawed. There is no clear-cut front runner. And secondly, I think that Flacco is very comfortable in what dynamics Kevin likes to use. And Kevin is very comfortable in the things he's trying to do to help not only Joe, but his offensive line. So where I'm at, Quincy, is that they have a firm grasp of how they have to throw the football for success. They're doing things to move the pocket. They're doing things to recreate rush angles to make things harder on tackles. They're adding bodies into the pass protection that then ultimately become receivers a second or two later because they use a little formation that involves double wing chip stuff. Then they put a back and a tight end out late on routes that can be a check down for the quarterback. Kevin has developed a really nice package of concepts there. So they have a firm grasp on who they are defensively, firm grasp on, I think, what they need to do to throw it. The only thing that concerns me is some ability to run, and that has been missing. So, I think when you look at that Jets game, for example, say the Browns are up 21-7 at half on the Texans. Do you trust that they'll be able to keep some consistency offensively in the second half to run to put it away? Because, again, you throw to score, you run to win at the end of ball games. And right now, I think we could all agree that the efficiency of the run game, although the Jets game was a step in the right direction, overall, the second half of the year has not been good enough. So that's the only phase of this whole thing that I'm a little worried about. The run defense on the other side of the ball hasn't been great the second half of the year. But I think, again, you can manage that in the playoffs in a way that teams pick up a first down running it, then they want to run into 2nd and 8, and then you get them to 3rd and down. We know how tough this defense makes it for opposing teams on 3rd down. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not even worried about the defense. I think they'll be fine. I am very focused on the offense, which I do think has, to your point of your question, an unlimited capability of what they can do when Flacco's playing well, which I think he's going to continue to do so. But I do have this little slight hesitation about, God, it would be nice to have Nick Chubb, because they're struggling to overcome one breakdown. Every play on the run game, it's one player missing somebody, and it's killing them. And they don't have an eraser in the backfield who takes care of that at times. So that's my only concern. But as you and I know, this is a passing league. So would I prefer to go into the playoffs, Quincy, with a run game issue or a pass game issue? I'll take run game issues 10 out of 10 times, because you can find the explosives in the pass game. And since what did Joe take over? 14, 13? They're a top 5 NFL offense in explosive play percentage because they're pushing it downfield, and Joe is challenging defenses in a way that we hadn't seen the Browns consistently do for the early portions of the season. So I know the data tells us that teams that make the Super Bowl, most of them, like 95% of them in the past 5-7 years, have been top 5 explosive play percentage teams, at least top 10. And the Browns pushing that threshold with Joe is a really encouraging thing. So I think the formula is good enough to win ball games that matter, but there is a phase here that does make you say, I wish that wasn't an issue so much.
Yeah, and you brought up the run game thing, and the most interesting thing to me when I look at that run game thing, and why I was kind of not canvassing, but kind of campaigning for the Browns to go after somebody like a Dalvin Cook, is I don't know what the numbers are, so you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't feel like we have a single running back that, like, on a consistent basis breaks tackles. Like, it is not somebody who, and I'm not even asking for like Nick Chubb, where it's like almost like 2 tackles he breaks a play, but like every single time, and I think you brought it up, where maybe the guard's late or maybe the center's late. Like, it has to be perfect in order for a run play to hit, because we can't sustain contact with our running backs and maintain a play. Like, one of the things I thought was great about Dearness Johnson while he was here was he could get hit once and still like make something happen. His contact balance was really nice. Jerome Ford shows signs of like having some good contact balance at times, but he's like very iffy. Like, either he gets spun all the way out and somehow stays on his feet and busts a 70-yard run, or he just gets tripped up very easily. We've talked about Pierre Strong not really having much contact balance, and Kareem Hunt has contact balance. He doesn't have that burst to make anything happen, though. Like, he's not going to gash you at this point. And I think when I look at the Browns run game, I think that's probably the thing that's hurting them the most. Like, I don't know how much different they are than what they usually are, from a, rhythm and timing standpoint, from like the run block game and everything else. It just feels like they can't sustain that contact. Like, if somebody gets back there and causes a little bit of havoc, that's it. That plays going for 2 yards maximum. We can't seem to make stuff happen there, and that is something that concerns me because I don't know if there's an easy fix to that. Right? Like, if the answer is basically your running backs just aren't that special, and that's pretty much it, then I don't know how you kind of manifest a consistent run game when you need it, because you're basically asking between, like, what, you're not going to ask Gary on Christian to be perfect. Maybe James Hudson, there's a higher level of expectation because he's been involved in the run game for a little bit, but you're basically asking guard, center, guard to be perfect in order for this run game to be consistent and work. And that's just not a reasonable expectation to have. It's like, hey, you have to be on time every single time. You have to clean out your break every single time. Nothing can go wrong. And I wonder, from, like, when you think about this problem, what do you think is a solution out there? Or do you think really the only solutions are personnel based at this point?
Well, much like you, I was a proponent of giving a guy like Dalvin Cook an opportunity. Not I think people get that a little bit confused because they want to say, I mean, in their mind, they're thinking you're saying Dalvin Cook's a long-term option here. It's not what I was saying. Like, this guy may be giving you a game in the playoffs where you activate him off the practice squad and he runs 10 times for 41 yards. Like, that's in and of itself enough to pay for what you're asking him to do. Um, Jerome Ford's data it's not awful per se. Like, his avoid percentage is relatively decent. The problem is that his efficiency on run on like expected yards carried is really, really tough. It's not anywhere near you where you would want it to be. So, like, he's 12th in tackles, forced, missed, or whatever. I think they claim to call them in this format for true media, because that's kind of what I'm going off of here. They call it tackles avoided, right? So he's up there in that, but he's very average in the percentage. So he's got 55 of those, which puts him at 12th, but he is, ultimately, based on a per carry basis, not anywhere near where you would like him to be. So if that's your lead back instead of your secondary back, that's going to leave a lot to be desired, more the way to put it, because I think the thing that what scares me about the Browns running game is the amount of plays that are negative. Rushes for 0 or negative yards is where they struggle the most, because you're talking Hudson is a bully at times, but he is, think of the way to phrase this. He is sloppy. He does not know how to get there. If he's there and he's locked on, he's tough. But I think when you look at, like, his technical ability, it's not anywhere near where you want it to be. And then John Christian's just not very good. The feet are sloppy. So you're talking 2 tackles in a perimeter-oriented run game that are not very good at the phase. And then they're also not, like, John Christian's not very good at gap down stuff. He cannot drive people out of holes. So yeah, you have pullers for counter and power and pin pull stuff they like to run, but I mean, they're not moving people out of the hole, so they're not able to create an alley. So to give you an example of where the run game stuff is faulty here, Quincy. So and I'm sorting this by percentage of runs at negative or 0 out of all your carries. At the top is, like, Gus Edwards is only 11% of his carries. So he's like number 1, James Cook 2, David Montgomery, Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones. Down at 30 is Kareem Hunt, where 20% of his carries. So 1 of every 5 carries for him goes for a negative or 0-yard gain. And then Jerome Ford, 1 of every 4 carries. He is, of the 48 running backs listed here at the very bottom, 27.5% of his carries go for 0 or negative yards. He also has a good boom percentage where, like, the Browns do relatively decent and explosive run percentage. This has kind of been the story of Kevin's rushing data over the last 3 years. They're really at the top of explosive runs, but way too much tilted into the negative side of things. So, like, again, I mean, if this is not sorting necessarily by the number that I'd like it to, but like he's, as far as running backs go, he's in the top 20 of explosive run percentage. So, long story short, man, I think that the personnel isn't great in the backfield. It needs really sound play up front, but the upfront play isn't quite good enough to create what you need. You need tackles. If you're going to pull your guards, you need tackles and tight ends who can consistently move people on the front side, wash them down. And they don't have that. So those holes that are usually moving laterally get condensed and pressed, and teams are boxing them in at a really high rate. So again, take that for what it's worth, but like that's why the run game is struggling, and they're seeking out any sort of deceptive way to run the ball, whether that's like wildcat at a really high rate. Kevin said he's done this more this year than any year in his career. They're doing some high, like, fake reverse motion sometimes to create some run lanes where the linebackers are having to shift out, like, to honor that fake. So they're going to have to get creative because man to man, they don't have the guys to do it. You know what I mean? They don't have movers at tackle the way that they have had at times. So that's where they're at. They have to try to overcome it, and they have to be really creative. I was looking at explosive runs. I was sorting it that way. Christian McCaffrey has 35. The next closest has 22. Mostert and James Cook. So 19th is Jerome Ford, and 15 explosive runs this year. So just to give you a little idea, like they are still getting a top 20 number there, but not as high as the Nick Chubb stuff has always been. Nick has been in the top 3 of this. If I look at sorting his 2019 to 2022, he's always a top 3 explosive runner. So that's a huge element they're missing, right? And they've been able to sort of replace quarterback. We can agree on this. Replace quarterback, find some acceptable tackle play in the pass game by helping them. You can't help running back at times if you don't have the guys making it crystal clear. And they've been unable to replace Nick. That's the thing. You want to know why they paid Nick Chubb. This is a glaring example this year of why they went that route. So that gives you an idea of why they're struggling to run it. We'll see if they can. I know the Texans have, since week 11, I talked about this last night, have been, by most metrics, a top 5 run defense. They've been really good. They shut the Browns down like 59 yards, 27 carries. So again, the Browns were up early, at least halfway through the game. I think they were pretty comfortable at halftime, if I recall. They ran 27 times with running backs between Strong, Ford, and Hunt, 27 for 59. It's not good. It's not good at all. So they're going to have to be better in this one. We'll see if some neutrality in the game helps a little bit, where teams are going to be caught a little more conflicted between run and pass. But I think this is the challenge of the game, Quincy, is how they handle running a little bit better, just a little bit more efficiently.
And last question before we get off here is Amari Cooper, 265 last time he played against the Texans. Now, nobody's expecting him to do that again, but what do you see when you look at that success versus Houston that you feel like is repeatable or something you can play off of or take advantage? Like, did they just kind of catch him on a bad day in Houston, or did they find something there that can be a real problem for Houston in this game?
Good question. So Joe Woods is very similar to what D'Amico does, 49ers disciple guys. So what the Niners like to do and what the Texans like to do and what they did in week 16 was a ton of match quarters. Cover 3 and match quarters was what they did most, and some cover 2. So what they will do is try to create those natural bracket coverages through the rules. Like, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this, but like, there's spot drop coverage, which is, hey, you're a curl flat player, you're playing 10 yards, you're rerouting number 2, and you're hitting your landmark, and then you're reading quarterback eyes. And then there's match coverage. You hear spot drop and match. Match is, we have rules based on the patterns that are run, and we're going to match routes. It's basically a man zone hybrid. And that's largely what the Texans run. And the Browns were able to manipulate that to take advantage for some concepts. They also, I mean, you don't go for 265 and Joe throw for 370 without beating up every coverage that the Texans threw out there. So they beat them cover 2, they beat them cover 6, they beat them in cover 4 quarters match stuff, and they beat their cover 3 as well. I think Stingley was just a beat off most of his coverage, like very close on a lot of those throws to Cooper. I'm sure he's excited to get another chance at him. I know Jimmy Ward, the safety, is now out. The struggle with the Texans is safety play. It's a big David Njoku week. Beating linebackers in coverage, beating safeties. Petrie's not been as good as they'd hope he would be this point in his career. Jimmy Ward is out with this. He's on IR now. He was kind of active in that game, but then he left. Steven Nelson should be playing the opposite corner of Stingley. So we'll see. I don't think that there's some clear cut, like you said, a repeat 265 in a playoff game would be bonkers, but I don't think there's some giant coverage adjustment that the Texans are going to put in place. I think Cooper's going to have a nice day, could get to 100 touchdown or two, but I don't think that there's, so like they're going to track him all over the field. Now, the Browns have been pretty good with the Flacco experiment against zone coverage, and they played a lot of teams that played a lot of zone. Going into that Jets game, I think I was tracking like 17% man against upwards of 83% zone coverage. Teams were sitting in zone. Rams, Bears, Jags, and the Texans played a lot of zone. Texans played like 88% zone and 10% man in the first matchup. Then I was in the Jets game. I was kind of worried about that. The Jets are a top 10 man coverage defense. How are the Browns going to handle that stuff? And then they beat it up early. They killed man coverage. Like Flacco was like 6 of 8 for 130 and a touchdown. So they got out of it. The Jets didn't play much man the second half, for late first half, second half. So the only big adjustment, there's two things the Texans can do. They can try to get crazy and blitz him like mad, try to make him uncomfortable there, or play more man. I think the Browns would welcome playing more man, and I think Flacco's been comfortable beating the blitz in his 5 games. He's had no trouble sitting in the pocket delivering a throw against chaos. So I think the Browns will have a lot of opportunities, Quincy, to throw it. Can they do it efficiently? Can they hit the throws, the opportunities that are there? You and I know it's 4 or 5 throws. If you miss them, it's tough to score. So I think the throwing opportunities will be there again. It's how well do they supplement that with running the ball, and can they keep CJ Stroud bottled up? They did a great job the first matchup, but that's Case Keenum. This is different. CJ Stroud struggles. The only coverage he has not put up stellar data against is cover 1. Browns like to live in a lot of cover 1, almost, 45% of the game. We'll see if they're willing to do that and how they change some of the pre to post snap pictures for Stroud. But I do think this is a good matchup still. It's not the one I would have preferred, but it is a good matchup for the Browns. I think that there's some things that they do that the Texans don't do well that tilt in their favor, but they got to go make the plays, man. They got to go make the plays. They got to get it done. I think that they're rightfully favored. The more I've studied this, rightfully favored, but it's the playoffs. They're on the road. Anything can happen. So we'll see. But I think your Browns are in a pretty good spot out there, those of you listening, to get this game done in the right way.
All right, Jake, thank you for coming on. Appreciate you. Make sure you check out Jake's stuff at the OBR and OBR Film Breakdown podcast that he does. A lot of good stuff that Jake's been producing out there. Jake, anything else that I missed?
I don't think so, man. I think we covered it. So, we'll check in with each other maybe next week, or if they keep this thing going all the way to the Super Bowl, we'll keep yucking it up. But yeah, this is an exciting game, man. Exciting time to be in the playoffs. First playoff game. Everybody can catch that one, and hopefully they put on a show. I feel pretty good about their opportunity here.
Yep, me too. But everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.